Hello. So welcome to Monday. Let's get started. So just wanted to let you all know, remind you all that this Wednesday we have a AMA about releases and deployments. So come along if you're interested in what we'll be doing. This one is going to be the last one that Maren leads, and then it will be down to us. So certainly from next month, I'll appreciate your support in helping to answer questions about releases. So, Alessio.
Okay. This is just an heads up. So the escalation process is changing. It's likely that, I don't know in which time frame, but bot will be developed to handle the association, and just familiarize with this idea because it's gonna change. That's all from me. Back to you, Amy.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I just want to make again a reminder: the backstage label is going away, so we should have two. Robert, you've got both those issues. But also just a heads up, since it is a label that we've been using in the past, that there's a couple of new options we should use instead, so that it's more clear that we're changing like workflows or pipelines or something like that. So cool.
Sorry, Amy, did you say I had two issues?
Yeah, there's two that you've got linked there that or you opened them at least. Maybe they're closed now. As far as I know, those are the only ones we have on that label. So. Cool. So onto discussion topics. I wanted to ask you all about triaging of issues. So I see we've got an awful lot of tickets in the triage state. I was wondering if there is already a workflow in place to kind of move those into ready to dev, or should we think about like putting something into place?
I think triage was just the default state of issues that there.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Yorick.
You're really quiet. There's a little audio coming through, just not a lot. But as far as I know, there's no current workflow for triage stuff.
That's great. Yeah.
All right. So apparently I forgot to turn up my volume. I was saying that the triage label is, I believe, the default state that we assigned. So it's not so much that we haven't triaged them, it's that people, I think, just haven't started on them yet. So yeah.
Cool. Sorry, Robert, you were saying?
Yeah, as far as I know, there's no current workflow for going through triage issues. It's just kind of, yeah, it's the label that gets automatically applied, and then as we're working on them, hopefully people change the label, but that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sometimes I forget by accident. My apologies.
That's all right.
Yeah, I think that also happens that we just, because it's the default, when we say we should work on something and then we never go back to it as really discussing it. So this is kind of the default state, and when priorities increase, then we move through it, but so far we basically work on priorities mostly. So if something is important enough, then it will move through the stages up to being developed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool.
I think it is also kind of confusing that we are working on the delivery tracker and the release tools tracker, and one of them is on GitLab.org and another one is in GitLab.com, and I think one repo doesn't have all the labels available, so we need to use another set of labels. So yeah, it's not the most friendly situation.
Yes, it's definitely surprising to me. There isn't a single view which has everything. Like there's quite a lot of boards, and you have to go and hunt it all down.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what everyone has said so far. I think like the triage label, I mean, I just don't use boards, which I know that I think we're trying to use them more, but it just hasn't been working for me personally. So I tend to forget to remove the triage label if I'm working on it. And yeah, I mean, but I think like it would be good if we did focus on triage a bit and figure out how we triage issues, especially for issues. I guess like I'm looking through the issue tracker now, and I don't see many issues that are being opened by people outside the team. So I kind of wonder whether, I mean, what does triage mean in that sense? Like if we open the issue, normally like we should be assigning priority and severity ourselves because we probably have a pretty good idea about it. Is that all we mean by triage, or do we mean something more?
I would hedge a bet that we also include the fact that we created the issue, but we haven't looked into potential use cases for how to solve the problem at hand. And it's also a way to advertise to the external people outside of our team that we are not currently looking at this issue at this moment in time.
I think a lot of the times it's like you create an issue. It's like, hey, I had this thought. I want to get your feedback on it. And then there's also like, there's the discussion label, the what is the workflow discussion label. And it's like those things seem very similar in purpose.
Yeah, I have to say in my head, it's kind of the discussion time, because I would think that although we can set a priority in terms of the idea, maybe the discussion changes that. I don't know. But I do think the discussion is quite valuable, not just from like sharing knowledge, but just generally. I think a lot of what everybody's working on like touches up on other stuff, but might not obviously overlap. So I think you all have quite different perspectives in like how we could go about things, and like maybe the risks and the priorities as well.
We could, instead of like, I think the bot automatically puts a delivery P4 label on issues. We could maybe have the default be to put the triage label, and then once you assign a priority, then the triage label would automatically get removed. But then again, I think there was some mentions that like, okay, sometimes it's a discussion, sometimes you flesh it out, but maybe at that time you still have a priority on it. I don't know, like, yeah.
I was looking at our handbook page because this thing of discussion was kind of, I wasn't sure about it. And the way we worded it is that the discussion is not a workflow label, but it's an external label that is meant to track issues that are supposed to be promoted to epics. So it's not really that we are discussing something. Yeah, we are discussing something, obviously, but basically, I think that the idea is that you have an idea, so you put this workflow infra triage, and this idea may be something easy like fixing simple behavior on release tools, whatever, and then it moves basically from triage to ready, and then we move on. Or the discussion may lead to a bigger issue that deserves to be promoted to an epic. In that case, we apply the discussion label and we start streamlining the conversation around it, but not sure if we are really doing this.
Would it be helpful for us to have to try and improve this stuff? Like, so I suppose one of maybe the question I'm asking is, would it be easier to know what to pick up next, or how to sort of prioritize things if we spent more time working out triaging tickets, or is there another area that's more useful?
I think that because we are the authors of all of our issues, or kind of, so it's quite obvious that the author is the one that cares about the specific topics and is the one that kind of keep track of when something will happen. So, but this is very specific to our workflow, because very few people outside of our team open issues on our tracker. So I'm not really sure about this.
Cool. Okay. I will. My main focus at the moment is I'm generally trying to sort of like tidy up a little bit and organize things. I'm hoping that we'll end up with something where we have it's a bit of a, you can sort of drop in and see a view of what we're working on. So I'll keep tweaking away on that stuff. Please give me feedback if it's not correct or helpful. But we won't make any radical workflow changes. I'm just generally trying to make it a bit easier to show off basically what we're working on to other people and work out for myself as well.
I'd be curious what other people's workflows are, and maybe this doesn't belong in this meeting, but like for me, it's sort of like, okay, what issues are in my inbox that have a P2 label or above, and that's the next thing I'm working on. And by the time I finish that, there's a new P2 issue, or it like goes to like an epic that we're working on, and that's sort of my workflow in a nutshell. So, but I think other people's workflow is different, and I'm not really having this problem like on what to work on next just because it's so epic driven right now. But maybe if it wasn't, then this would be a bigger issue. I would like to see us like just define what this triage means, because that's, I would say, a bit confusing for me.
Cool. Okay, I'll have a stab at defining it. I'll stick it in somewhere, an issue, and we can just iterate on that. And then once we've got it worked out, I can add something to the handbook. Cool. Myra.
Yes, so I normally join incidents calls to learn like a thing or two and to see what I can pick there. But there are times on those calls, mostly when SREs are talking, in which I feel that I am in a meeting with a bunch of aliens because I don't really understand what are they talking about. So I found this issue about moving or trying to separate the line between engineers and SREs. And I don't know, I find it interesting, and I don't know if anyone else also finds this interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, I was sort of wondering like if there's some interest in this, then I could create a version of this issue for delivery, and we could play around with ideas of basically how we can knowledge share. I know like a few people have mentioned that like you may have interest in some of these things. We can see how that works out.
I think this is a nice idea, and especially it will also help us in shaping what we want to do with delivering our own software, because having this better understanding of what we are running and how we are running things in production may help a lot. So yeah, I definitely agree that this is a good idea, but probably I will also try to understand from Jarve and Scarbeck what they are doing, because what I'm thinking here is that if most of their work is about migrating to Kubernetes, so I don't know if there's something easy enough to pick up for someone that is not an SRE to get familiar with Chef or other tools that we are not using as backend engineers. On the other side, it's easier, at least from my perspective, because I know that Scarbeck, but also Jarve are already contributing to release tools. So the opposite flow is already in place, let's say. We can improve it, but it's already in place.
Yeah, thanks, Alessio. Like, I think it's really like even like super tiny things, right? If it's like we have I don't know, even like we're going through the RCA after an incident, or just something like that. We've got a corrective action. I think like even just a little bit of knowledge sharing around the overall life cycle could be helpful. So I'll draft something up for delivery, and we can have a little bit of a play around about, it doesn't have to be an exact copy of how Scalability are doing it, and it doesn't have to be anything formal either, right? It can be an informal thing, but perhaps we'll have a little look at the sorts of things we could knowledge share on or pair up on, or even just tickets that could be like issues that could be kind of marked as like, oh, this one's actually reasonably straightforward and you could learn about X, might help other people to pick things up. We'll see how that goes. Awesome. Great. Thanks for raising that, Myra. So I will stop the recording.